Hi everybody. So for the muscular system presentation, I chose to talk about the makeup, the structure of the skeletal muscle. So first I wanted to acknowledge that the skeletal muscle is not the only type. So muscle types in the human body, they have the skeletal muscle, the cardiac muscle, and smooth. Now how they compare and contrast, the skeletal, if you look at the pictures around right here, skeletal muscle is going to be striated. It has these little stripes and lines in them. And then this is going to be voluntary movement. So I choose, my body has the energy inside of it, and I choose to make things work with how I move each body part. The cardiac muscle, it is also striated. You can kind of see those little bitty lines going through in there. But this one is involuntary, okay? I can't control it. It is the muscle around the heart. It's specifically for that. I can't make it work. It does it on its own. Smooth muscle is not striped. It doesn't have these striations through it, so they call it smooth. And once again, it is involuntary. These are going to be things like, your eyes blinking, different parts in your body that they allow for certain functions to occur within your body that you cannot control. Now, something with your eye, yes, I can purposely blink my eyeball, but you can blink your eyes without forcing it to happen. So it is a natural muscle that works and functions. So I am going to focus on the skeletal muscle in this presentation. So again, skeletal muscle, it is striated. It is under the control of the nervous system. So it is going to be connected to all those neurons, each little part, signals being sent to each other. It is an extremely multi-layered, well-organized system. And the cells in this system, we also call them muscle fibers. And of all the cells in the human body, these are the largest. Different components that help the skeletal muscles function, that allow the nervous system to control these movements and for us to, well, first let me say that the skeletal muscle, by definition, is a muscle that helps your skeleton move. So it is a muscle that allows me to lift up my arm. There are bones in my arm. There are bones in my legs. There are muscles attached to them to help them be moved by me. So different components that allow that to happen. You have something called the sarcoplasmic reticulum, abbreviated with SR. We have been familiar with endoplasmic reticulum in cells, and we abbreviate that with ER. But this one, there's a similar format to it, similar looks to it, but it is separate. It specifically deals with calcium ions, and those two things are going to affect actin molecules and myosin molecules. And I will go into more details in just a minute. So here is a picture. It is from our textbook. It breaks it down. I thought it was a beautiful illustration as to how this works. So I'm going to get my pencil here. I like to draw as I work. So here's our, somewhere around in here, there was going to be a bone next to this. Let's change my color here to a lighter color that's going to pop out maybe. So my bone is going to be right in this area here, and this muscle is attached to it. It's aligning right around that skeletal bone. And so the whole system is a muscle. But if I look inside of that muscle, you have this entire tube-looking particle here, and that is a fascicle. So this is the entire large, rounded piece of the muscle. And throughout and around, you see these white little areas right in here. That is the fascia. The fascia is a connective tissue. It intertwines throughout and over all of our muscles. So it helps connect individual parts. So what it's actually connecting, so you can see it around the outside. But then there's all these almost perfectly cylinder-like pieces inside of it. Here is where one of them have been pulled out. So right here, part of one of these sections have been pulled out of the picture. This is called the muscle fiber. It is called the, well, actually, let me take that back. So this is, let me restart that. I'm jumping ahead in my image here. So this part is your main muscle. The individual part right here is the fascicle with the connective tissues keeping them all next to each other. So I apologize for that. Looking ahead at my picture, here was the muscle fiber being pulled out right there. So it goes fascicle, muscle fiber, which is a single muscle cell as they have it right here. But then I can break it down even smaller. Okay, so if I break it down even smaller, the muscle fiber also has little circles in it, and each cylinder or cylindrical tube is called a myofibril. Each myofibril is made of dark and light bands, and I'm going to go up close in and between those bands here to explain that process. Whoops, sorry, gotta close that. Okay, so myofibrils. Again, I am to the smallest, most inner part in that muscle, myofibril. These are myofibrils up close. Around those myofibrils, there is the sarcoplasmic reticulum, kind of bonding them and forming them together. Now, what that's going to do is along that, there are little sacs. There are these little areas, and inside these sacs, they are going to contain calcium. These calcium ions are extremely important for our muscle because without those calcium ions, you do not get muscle contraction, muscle relaxation. It is part of a very important process that allows these things to occur. So, the sarcoplasmic reticulum, it contains sacs that hold calcium ions. Now, on these myofibrils, there are these little tails and heads, these little molecules called myosin molecules. Okay, so on the thick A-band filaments, there are myosin molecules. And on them, on their head, there is a way to connect an actin molecule with the myosin molecule. And if those two things bond together, they bind and connect, this allows my muscles to contract. And again, when they stop binding, my muscle is able to release and relax. So, I'm going to go back to this other picture. On the myofibril, there are dark, thick bands and thinner, light bands. So thick and thin. The thick is where the myosin molecules can be found. The thin is where you have the actin molecules and these little hair-like pieces that come off of it that help connect every single one of these little pieces, piece by piece, together. So, when they connect, we say that it creates a cross bridge. So, here's that cross bridge. Now, for these two things, these two molecules to combine, something has to happen, and calcium is a part of it. So, on that thin filament, there is not only actin, there is also two more proteins called tropomyosin and troponin. Those two together actually prevent calcium ions from moving and being released out of that sarcoplasmic reticulum. So if those two proteins are in a certain position, calcium cannot be released, which means there is no binding that occurs. However, if I reposition and those molecules, those protein molecules, they are going to reposition when my body releases the energy in the form of ATP. ATP is going to be released, which allows those two proteins to reposition themselves, which then allows the calcium ions to be released. When they're released, that cross bridge, that connection, that binding between actin and myosin can occur. So once that binding occurs, those proteins have been repositioned for the binding to occur. That is a muscle contraction. That is me being able to make my arm move, grab something, move it across the room, or I'm lifting weights. That contraction is me being able to move my skeletal system, my skeleton by my muscles acting, contracting. Now, for my muscle to be able to relax, I have to have more ATP. Brand new ATP must be released. So energy is released again, and that allows another reposition, which moves them away, blocks the calcium once again, so calcium gets put back into the sarcoplasmic reticulum. The cross bridge stops, and that allows my muscle to relax. So, again, skeletal muscles, they are voluntary. Now, even though there are processes inside of our body that must occur and work on their own, it is considered a voluntary movement. I control when I want to move my muscles. So it is well organized. There are a lot of different parts inside of the other. So I start with the full muscle, but then I can bring out a part inside the muscle, which is a fascicle. I can bring it out another small one, which is called the muscle fiber. And then I can bring out even a smaller piece, which is the myofibril. And that is made of those thick and thin filaments. They have the SR and the calcium ions in them. And energy is what helps this whole process occur. If my body is not producing ATP, if that energy is not flowing and being produced in my body, then I will not be able to have that binding of these two molecules to help contract or relax my muscle. So, skeletal system, very important, very well organized, and ATP, in my opinion, is one of the most important pieces in this entire system. Here are my references, and thank you for listening to my presentation.